Okay, so now we'll get into the data. So the general perception is that income inequality has risen substantially about since the 1980s. Okay, now this is the perception, and it's pretty much taken as gospel, I would say, out there. However, within the profession, there's actually a lot of dispute about these figures, and there are some authors using their preferred methods of constructing the data that find smaller increases in inequality. So the statistics that everyone cite usually come from Piketty and Saez, and then actually Zuckman is like another author who's working with them recently. This is kind of older, their older calculations. All right, and so what is this? This is the top decile. So the people who are making in the top 10%, this is like roughly, I think it's like at the household level, I think it's around 200,000 basically. So if you have like two six-figure earners, you're essentially in the top, top 10%. Maybe it's like 250. I don't know, somewhere in there. You can look it up where these shares are. Okay, and so you can see basically this is the share, the share of the income going to that top 10% is rising here. This is the top 0.1%, their share going up according to Piketty and Saez. But this is capital income, so this is labor income. So this is like this is income that you get from like working, from your salary. The capital income shares have not increased that much. So this is why the focus back here, the focus is on labor income. That seems to be where the wage inequality or inequality of income is being driven. Is like by the people at the top of the distribution are making much more than they were in the past, or their share has gone up. This shows all of them together. So this is the top 1%. You see that share dramatically rising. This is the top 5%. And then this is from the 90th percentile to the 95th percentile. Okay, and these are the stats that everyone's kind of familiar with that get cited and tweeted out. And they're primarily from these. Well, Zuckman now is a key author on this. And I believe there's just an update. Sorry, I don't have that in there here, but generally the picture looks the same. And so you have this kind of increase in that 1%, the share going to the 1% since mid 70s, although roughly most people consider it from the 1980s on. And so we're going to focus on, again, we're going to focus on labor income. And this is everyone talking about the 1%. This is what they're talking about. That top 1%, their share has increased. Okay. Now, as a counterpoint, again, I said these statistics are much disputed. So I'm not going to make you watch this video, but you could watch it if you wanted to. This is the link. And kind of the criticism is, well, the benefits have increased. So people in the middle, even people at the bottom, they're getting lots of income that doesn't look like income. So, this up here is really only considering what you're earning in wages. But many people are also getting health insurance from their employer. And many people also, and we're talking people in the, bottom 50% are getting health insurance from their employers. I'll show you the stats in a little bit, but many workers get their health insurance from their employers. And the cost of that has risen significantly, as we covered, as we've discussed in this class, I think from time to time. And so that non-monetary compensation, that health insurance, the value of that has increased. So people in the middle's total compensation has actually increased by a lot if we include that health insurance, but we're not including it up here. So that would make this dramatic rise look less dramatic if we were to put that health insurance in there. Inflation is very important as well. So we're adjusting all these figures for inflation. But there are different ways you can adjust for inflation, and this turns out to matter. Unreported income matters as well, and so this is kind of the big disputed one. And so when you're thinking about people at the top, you probably in your mind you have like CEOs or like people who found companies, but a lot of these people at the top in the top 10% are just like programmers or doctors or engineers. And these people are making a wage. And so essentially all of their income is reported. So you think about that person, the programmer who works for Amazon, the doctor who works for the anesthesiologist who works for a hospital. All of that person's income is reported. It's through a corporation, so it's reported. You see it all. They're not doing anything on the black market. They're not doing anything under the table. At the bottom of the distribution, there's a lot of under the table work. So people in kind of the bottom 20%, bottom 10%, they're doing kind of work for friends or work here and there. They're essentially just paid in cash. And so, if you add that in, if you adjust for that, that'll make things look different. Second important thing is that this is more having to do with wealth inequality. But what's never taken into account is Social Security. And this recent paper kind of looks at this and essentially shows that all the rise in wealth inequality can be undone if you include Social Security benefits. So people have actually a huge source of wealth that they don't think about. Is that if in the U.S. that is when you retire, you get Social Security. So when you retire, you get this monthly stipend from the government, essentially a pension. And that is incredibly valuable. I mean, that's like part of your wealth. So it's like if you include that in people's wealth, the fact that they have this payment coming to them or after they retire, then the extent of wealth inequality looks much different. This is another important point that we're not kind of comparing like to like. Like households have changed significantly over time. So most of this is looking at household income inequality. So this is taken at the household level, but households have changed a lot. So you have a lot more elderly people. So there's a lot more people who are, since people live longer now, with the exception of lower educated whites, they don't live as long. But everyone else, their life expectancy has gone up. So we have more retired people. So that's mechanically going to kind of add a bunch of households at the bottom of the distribution. The retired people, their income is very low. So we're mechanically adding low-income households as people live longer. Also, we have more single-headed households. And this is particularly acute among low education households. So low education households will typically be single-headed, headed by one person. And so if you're comparing a household that only has one income to a higher income household that often has two earners, and so it just mechanically, looks like this, we're going to have this mechanical expansion of the gap as, essentially at the bottom, if you're taking households that were two earner households and splitting them up. And at the top, you're taking households where maybe only one person worked, but now the other spouse is now working, you're adding another income stream. So if you're just kind of do that, you're just going to naturally get this spread. And so all these factors, will make income inequality look much worse when really things haven't changed that much over time. Okay. And so Audit and Splinter, essentially, they try to make some of these adjustments. They're adjusting for household composition and then unreported income and this corporate income, which I assigned a kind of article kind of going through the details of this. And so their top 1% calculations, pre-tax and then after tax, essentially show no change. And so again, if you make these adjustments, it doesn't look as bad. Now, I should be very careful. These are much disputed, so it's very, very hot. These guys, Splinter, Audit and Splinter, and these guys, primarily represented by Zuckman here, the Z here, are fighting all the time about these figures. Super contentious about which is the right way to do it, whether to include these or not. But the point is, and we don't have to delve all into that. The point is, like, this is not a simple task to measure this. A lot of things change over time. And how you account for this gives you much different pictures of the extent of the rise in inequality. Okay. All right. More data next.